Hello, all you beautiful people out there. Welcome to my YouTube channel where we're talking about child abuse and everything related to it. My name is Liz, and I grew up in a dysfunctional home with two abusive parents. And today I want to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder and complex post-traumatic stress disorder, what the difference is, and why people who have been abused in childhood, especially if it was ongoing, most likely have complex PTSD. And I also want to add that a lot of people have been abused in their childhood and don't even know it because it took the form of emotional abuse, and they haven't detected the emotional abuse that was done to them. They're walking around with complex PTSD and don't even know it. And might have other diagnoses that are there because of the complex PTSD. So, first of all, post-traumatic stress disorder, I'm going to read from an actual definition. So, post-traumatic stress disorder is a mental health issue that can occur in people who have lived through a specific traumatic event or series of events. So, and it has a definitive timeline, and in many cases only happened once. So this is like an assault, sexual assault, car accident, natural disaster, many times going to war. So almost anybody can have PTSD, and most people do. We've all been through some stuff. Complex PTSD is a result of prolonged exposure to trauma over long periods of time, often during childhood. So, in my case, I was born into a toxic family. Both of my parents have personality disorders, and they abused me physically, they abused me emotionally, and they neglected me. There was probably a lot of verbal abuse in there as well. And this, I know that I've experienced trauma in the womb. So even before I was born, I was under a lot of stress. And this continued all the way until I moved out of my house when I was 19 years old. And unfortunately, the abuse never stopped because I kept having relationships with my family, and I also developed romantic relationships that had the element of abuse in it. So I had never really been free of the life of abuse. And when you go through abuse and trauma as a child, and that's everything you know, it literally changes the brain. And this results in developmental delays. So this really affects our ability to function in the world as adults and form healthy relationships for ourselves and a good life. Because we didn't get our needs met. Our needs were not met. And we were harmed in a number of ways, and it left its mark. So all abuse is physical abuse in nature because it affects you physically, it affects your brain, it changes your brain, and people with complex PTSD don't know anything else. This is their normal, is responding to trauma day in and day out. So I'm going to scroll down here and go over some of the key symptoms of PTSD. Intrusion symptoms, so recurring involuntary and distressing memories of a traumatic event, recurring dreams or nightmares, and dissociative reactions like flashbacks. So also in PTSD, we refer to them as triggers, which is something that's going on in the environment that's reminding us of the event, the traumatic event, and it's kind of like we go back in time to when we were experiencing that, and we experience it physically and emotionally, and we lose touch with reality. So we're responding to a very life-threatening event that feels very real to us, but we're not actually there. Avoidance, external avoidance, is avoiding certain people and situations so as to not get triggered by them or reminded of the traumatic event. So if you were in a car accident, maybe you avoid, the intersection where you had the accident. Emotional avoidance, avoid talking about the event to people you know, not wanting to go there. Negative changes in thinking and mood, so negative beliefs about oneself or one situation, memory issues, lacking interest in one's enjoyable activities, feeling detached from others, ongoing inability to experience positive emotions like happiness or loving feelings. I have definitely experienced all of those. Changes in arousal and reactivity, heightened irritability and anger outbursts, so that can be like hypervigilance. It's like where you're ultra sensitive to what's happening, and then something that's threatening, you're overreactionary as well. It's where so emotionally triggered by whatever's happening, you respond, react as if it's life-threatening. Feels that way. Easily startled or frightened, concentration difficulties, insomnia. Okay, so on to cptsd. Very similar, a few differences. Nightmares. So I've experienced nightmares, especially if there are things going on in my life that are really stressing me out. So I don't get nightmares now. I haven't had nightmares in a really long time, probably a couple years. But I do know that if there's something going on in my life that is not good for me and is causing me stress, I will have nightmares. And I can wake up triggered from the nightmare, and that is no fun. So if you're experiencing that, you may want to take a look at what is so stressful for you right now and take a break, if you can. Memory issues, often blocking out reminders of the traumatic event. There's a lot of my childhood I don't remember, and a lot of my life. I don't know what more to say about it. This makes some types of therapy difficult. For me, I was doing EMDR, and that's like you're trying to recall a memory, and I don't have, I do have some memories, but this is like not just one day. It was like your whole life. It's hard to pinpoint a memory that was traumatic. The whole thing was traumatic. Heightened irritability, so I would call that being ultra sensitive, and as well as overreactionary. Decreased interest in once enjoyable activities, if you even had any. For me, my once enjoyable activities were crushed when I was a child, so I just didn't even have those. Dissociation. I think when you're, triggered, for me, I dissociate. Like, for me, it's like I'm not in my body anymore. I'm not in touch with reality. I'm in a place that, I'm in the past. I'm reliving that feeling. It's not an event. It's an overall feeling that I'm revisiting, and it's way too overwhelming for me. Dissociation, I think, checking out. Flashbacks, I call flashbacks triggers. I get triggered and I literally feel like I go to the past and revisit what it felt like to be me as a 3-year-old or something. And those emotions that I could not process or handle at the time. And so it really feels like reliving that time in my life. It's awful. So for maybe someone who had like PTSD, a flashback would be like memory. But for many people who were abused as children, there isn't a memory. There's just a feeling, an overall feeling of what it felt like to be you. And it's awful. Severe feelings of guilt and shame. We often feel like the abuse that was done to us was our fault. We did something to deserve that. And if only we were better, we could be loved. If only we could be the people they want us to be, we would be loved. And we're just not good enough. So we feel like everything's our fault because that's what we're told. And in adulthood, this winds up manifesting as like inappropriate shame and guilt as an adult, like feeling shame and guilt for other people's wrongdoings, and it's pretty debilitating. It's really hard for us to hold other people accountable when we're doing that for their crimes. Difficulty maintaining close and trusting relationships with others, yes. This is the biggest part. And, we child abuse survivors, we have attachment disorders, which means we didn't get our attachment needs met by our parents. So we have a really hard time being close to others, forming bonds, connection, trusting people. We don't feel safe doing this. And being close to others reminds us of, what we needed from our parents and didn't get. So, yeah. All of that, I've had all of that, and it talks about treatment here. I'm going to do a series of videos on all of the elements of healing complex PTSD because it's its own beast. And so stay tuned for that, and I'll put it in a playlist. But I wanted to give some background first on the difference between PTSD and complex PTSD, and if you know someone who has either one of these disorders, you want to share with people you know to help them understand you or them. You can share this around. Thank you guys for watching. meantime, be kind to you. Deserve it. Love you guys. See you soon.